Hello and welcome back to Ashley Main Makes. So today I am making a very cute little cottagecore peasant dress. Now to do this, I'm actually using the recently expanded Charm Patterns Rita top, which is actually just a cute little peasant blouse with a add your own skirt waistline on it. The skirt of my choice being a double half circle skirt from the Wildflower Coquelicot skirt. So I'll leave that down below. I've made it previously. And we're just going to be doing a fun little faux shearing hack on the back, very much inspired by Son de Flor. So if all that sounds good to you, let's just get right into it. So to start things off, I am first just working on the one little bit of patterning that I'm doing for this project, which is for the faux shearing back. So I'm just overlapping the two waistband pieces that I'd previously traced off the blouse and overlapping them by the seam allowance, which in this case is 5/8, just so that I can see how much that top piece is being gathered down into that waistband. You can see that like few inches of difference there. So all in all, I think it added up to about almost 4 inches, 3.5, 4 inches of extra gathering that the shearing's creating. And this will enable me to basically have a flat back piece, and then it'll all get gathered in by that shearing. So you can see me marking this out, putting all my labels on, and making sure that I've noted I'm cutting it on the fold. And we're jumping right into cutting. So I'm actually cutting out the skirt here, which is going to be a double half skirt. And you're going to say, Ashley, a double half skirt is a full skirt. In this case, it is not. It is two half circle skirts that are being gathered down into the waistband. And I'm actually using the Wildflower Coquelicot skirt here, which I'm actually oddly enough wearing while I'm cutting this out. And I'm just giving it a little bit of extra space at the back there. You can see me add those few extra inches that the shearing's going to give me. And I'm actually cutting it a few inches longer here, just to give me a little bit longer length than that skirt, because personally I'd like it a little bit longer. So I cut out 4 of these in total. And just kind of winging it mostly, honestly. It's pretty slapdash here. You can tell I was in a bit of a rush. But, you know, here we go. And now I'm back on those waistband pieces. So I found on that last linen dress that I made that it had a tendency to grow and stretch as I wore it throughout the day. And so I really wanted to prevent this on this dress. And so all I'm doing is lining this whole waistband piece with a bit of cotton, and that'll also provide some strength for the faux shearing. So I'm just using a little bit of scrap that I had left over actually from making the first version of this dress that I did on the live stream. So I'll link that up below. But basically I'm just creating 2 exact of the same versions here of this waistband piece. And that actually ended up working really well. It keeps it really sturdy and nice and straight and keeps it from wrinkling while I'm wearing it. So I'm just pressing everything nice and flat here. Again, good sewing is good pressing. I know we hate it, but you know, 'tis what it is. Just giving all those pieces a good press and making sure they match up. You can see I've got all of them labeled there because they all look very much alike. And here I am putting the gathering into the top part of the blouse just at the front. Obviously I'm omitting the part at the back because again we're adding that shearing. So I'm just adding my gathering stitches here into the top. And then I'm going to pin that whole waistband piece in place onto the bodice, just matching up the notches where they would go. This is actually the back, so you can see how much wider it is now. Again, it's that 3 or 4 inches wider than it was. And then I'm actually sandwiching the main body piece in between my 2 waistbands. So again, that'll enable the waistband to be nice and smooth, and it'll be nice because it'll keep all my raw seam allowances on the inside of the waistband. So a little bit nicer finish, and again, just keeps it nice and smooth on the outside when I'm wearing it. So again, we're doing the same thing to the front. I'm just nicely evening out those gathers, just making sure they look really nice, because how they're going to look now and how they're pinned onto this is how they're going to look in the final product. And then we're going to sew my whole sandwich together, just making sure that everything is nice and flat. You can see me fiddling it with it a little bit here just to make sure everything is going through the machine nice and even. So I'm just pressing all my seam allowances towards my waistband, just making sure that's pressed really well so that it looks as nice and as smooth as it possibly can be, because obviously we want as snatched a waist as possible. And just double checking that. And then I am marking out my seam allowances here. So making sure that my faux shearing doesn't get caught in the seam allowance. And I'm just marking that at 5/8 on both sides, top and bottom. And then I'm just sewing along that first line I made. And then we're going to go again here. And I'm going to be doing each of these at a 1/2 inch to fit my 3/8 inch elastic. And I'm mostly just using the side of my presser foot at this point. I didn't go through and mark the rest of these by hand. I just marked those top two to keep out of the way of the seam allowance. And then I'm just sewing in the rest of them. Basically just using kind of where I know a 1/2 inch is on my machine. You kind of get used to your machine's quirk and sizes after a while, and you can do this pretty well. But if you need to mark them. Again, rushing. So here I am threading the elastic through said channel. So I actually only did every other channel. So you don't need to do every single channel for this to work out properly. And I did about 3 elastics here for this one on me. And I just pinned the end in place so that they'll stay as I'm doing this. And I'm using this little elastic threading tool that I got for this project just because of the sheer amount of elastic in it. This whole garment is practically elastic. So, and it worked okay. I wasn't a super fan of it. It did lose the elastic in some of the longer channels, so I don't know if I'd recommend it, but I was trying something new. You can definitely just use a safety pin like I normally use in a lot of my videos. But, you know, to each his own, you know, trying new things. That's what this all about, right? We got to keep learning, doing stuff. So here I am just threading the final one. And again, just making sure that's nice and smooth in there, that it's not twisted at all, because that's bad. And then also pinning that one. And then I'm going to be running it through the machine just to make sure it stays firmly in place. So I'm just stitching in the ditch here, and then just really making sure I go back and forth a little bit over each one of these elastics to really hold it in place. And then all I'm going to do is grab my tails really firmly, and we're going to pull this tight. And look how satisfying that is. Some beautiful shearing instantaneously. I definitely love this. I'll definitely do this again. It held really firm. It's definitely a little bit firmer technique than just using like the elastic shearing thread. And I think for this application with this loose woven linen, this was kind of the way to go. And I'm just comparing the size up here to the original pattern piece just to double check that that's going to work. And it needs to be smaller than that original pattern piece to make sure that it's going to lay flat against my body. And so, and here we are just sewing the end of those tails in. Again, just going back and forth, making sure it's really firmly in there and cutting them off. And then I serged the whole side of this piece, including the armhole. I'm going to be serging all my raw edges after this for the rest of this project, so just so that you know. And here I am just putting in my side seam, I believe. Yes. And then I'm just pressing it firmly with my ham. I love my ham. I don't know why I chose to do that with the ham. I think because the waist is a little bit curved, so it just made it a little bit easier. Giving a lot of steam there. Just again, making sure it's nice and smooth and flat. And now here I'm actually pre-putting in the channel at the bottom of the sleeve. I'll do this actually for the whole project. This is just much easier to do when it's still flat like this. I'm not going to sew it in at this point, but it gives me a guideline so I don't have to iron the whole thing in later in the round, which would be much more difficult considering how gigantic this sleeve is and the neckline opening. So this is just a little trick that I like to do most of the time. I will pre-iron in my hems. I'm using my little pressing guide here. It's like a little felt guide. It's like one of my favorite tools that I bought. It's actually a quilting thing. And just using that to make sure I'm at that 1/2 inch for that channel. So now I'm actually going through and sewing up the side seam of the sleeve, and you can see here at the end I'm actually just disregarding that hem I put in and just making sure I sew it nice and flat, and then back tacking at the end there. And then what I'll do is I'll iron just this one little section, and then I'll return up just that one little section of hem. And so that way that's all I have to do to complete the whole sleeve, and then just make sure that the entire rest of the seam is also pressed nice and smooth. And then just again double checking that channel on the flat and pinning it in place, making sure that I've got it in such a way that I'll remember to leave a little gap here. So starting at my 1 pin, you can see I've got about 1.5 inch gap there, the end of my channel. So I'll just sew my channel in place until I get to the other pin, and then backstitch again, and that'll give me some room to actually thread the elastic through. So now I am just sewing that sleeve all the way along my neckline. You can see how absolutely gigantic this neckline is without any elastic in it. So it is just truly a giant elasticized bag until I pull it together. But I'm also going to be sewing that elastic channel in, same way, same method, and I did also iron that a bit in advance. So now I'm going to put all the elastic in. You can see me measuring kind of my forearm there and just making sure that that's going to be nice and comfortable for me personally. I don't usually follow the guidelines that you've got in the pattern itself. I also shortened the sleeves to be 3/4 length on this, which I've failed to mention up until now. But yeah, that just means that it's going to be comfortable for me and my body. Everybody's like arms is going to be a little bit different. And it's one of the things I love about making your own garments. So I'm just going to stitch my elastic together. You can barely see what I'm doing there. Just stitching the one little piece of elastic together. And then sewing up that couple inches of my channel to close off and finish them off. So now we're jumping over to the skirt. And unfortunately somehow I did not actually film putting the skirt together. But it was relatively straightforward, just attaching all the panels together and putting in some inseam pockets in this case. And I think this is mostly because you can see the screen keeps filling up with skirt. There is just so much skirt. It got a little out of control towards the end here as I'm putting in my 2 lines of gathering stitches. And I've just gathered them down to the bodice here. And then you can see when I hit this flat part right here, I actually laid the pocket itself over my gathering stitches so that it's not giving me extra bulk around the waistband. So that's always a nice little touch if you're putting in gathers or pleats. That's always a really good idea. And then we get back into the gathered part as we're attaching to the bodice, and the screen fills up with skirt again. Just so much skirt. And so since it is so much skirt, I decided that I was just going to finish all the edges with my serger, and that just cut it all off and made it nice and neat and nice and even. And of course gave it a little bit of extra strength because we just have attached it straight to the bodice. And I think this worked out really great. Not perfect, but you know, good enough. Good enough. And the screen fills up with skirt yet again. And now we are jumping onto the hem, which is the last and final thing. And in this case, I'm actually using some purchased hem tape here. This is a cotton poly blend. And this actually worked out really great because the good thing about the cotton poly is it doesn't allow the hem of the skirt to wrinkle. So it basically comes out of the dryer just like pretty much perfect and doesn't really need to be ironed. But I did use 1 million packets of it. You can see me switching packets here, and I'm just sewing it along the diagonal or the bias to maintain the bias in my tape here. I'm just cutting off the excess, and I'm going to be pressing that nice and flat, just so it looks like nothing ever happened, even though I went through 4 packages of this bias tape, which is a lot. I'd say it was more expensive than buying a whole yard and making the whole pack that I did last time. But in this particular case, because of that anti-wrinkle factor, it was definitely worth it. And we're coming right up to the end of the skirt here and finally sewing up that hem. Overall, I am extremely pleased with this dress. There are basically no changes that I would make, and that is a ridiculous rarity. This bodice fit me basically perfect right out of the package, which has also never happened before, combined with that Cottagecore skirt that I already know I liked, and even that faux shirring, which was the first time I'd ever tried that. It all came together to give me what turned out to be a really wonderful result. I think one of the things that contributed to this was really taking some time to consider the fabric and the patterns together. Originally, I was looking at a lot of cottagecore dresses that had this shirring in the back, but they were a lot more of a structured bodice, and with how lightweight this linen is, that really wouldn't have worked well together. So really taking some time to plan my project and thinking about what would work best for the fabric instead of shoehorning it into what I was originally thinking of really gave me a beautiful result, and it's taken me a long time to get that far, and it really shows me how far I've come in my sewing journey. So thank you so much for watching, guys. If you'd like to support what I'm working on, please hit that like button down below. It really helps the channel out. As well as do let me know if there's any particular dress, cottagecore dress, that you would like to see. I know I've had a lot of special requests for some brand specific dresses, and I'd really like to know what you would like to see. And with all that being said, again, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. We're live streaming again on Sundays, so come join me there. And thank you so much. Bye, guys. Please hit that button down below. It really helps me out. And what was I saying? What am I making? I'm making a thing. Actually, a top pattern for a peasant blouse that I'm cutting at the and please do let me know which cottagecore dress cottagecore. Hello and welcome back to Ashley Made Makes, and I know nothing. I think the last take was good. We'll just call that good. We're tired.